Well, hey folks, welcome to Solar Cabin Channel. The rain finally stopped, so now I can get busy on this mudroom and hot tub project again. And I did go down and get some more materials, scrounged up a few more items, and I picked up some lumber for the walls and things like that. I was just going to show you, give you an overview again of what I'm going to be doing in this project. I'm building a 4 by 8 foot mudroom and space for my hot tub, Japanese hot tub. And this is going to be my view out these windows from my back porch. You can see that there's the foot of the Rocky Mountains, and we still got snow up in those mountains. And I'll zoom in here a little bit. You can see that that pipe, that PVC pipe, that is actually my wiring for my solar panels, my 400 watt solar panel kit. The wiring comes in and around through the PVC. The PVC protects the wiring. And I'm glad I didn't bury it, actually, because it will make it easier to move it around. Make sure I'm not getting on top of my wiring pipe so I can move it. I pushed it in so that it would not extend out, and then I can build around it. So it worked out actually quite well. I need to do a little sweeping and cleaning. You can see this is because this has been kind of the dog's yard, she's kind of dug around here places for her to lay down. And so it's made the ground uneven. So I need to level the ground out a little bit. I'll take out some dirt off of the high spots, and I'll put it down on the low spots, and then I've got my material set out here. I've got my 6 deck block that I'm going to use, and this is my floor framing material, 2 by 6 lumber, 2 by 6 by 8 lumber, which I'm going to make for my floor frame. Okay, so real quick here, I'm going to get a shovel out, and I'm going to fill in the low spots from the high spots, and then tamp that down really good, and I will set my deck blocks in place and do a little bit of measuring so that I can get my foundation started. Okay folks, so I've got the outside rim of my floor constructed, and I'm just going to walk you through this now. I'm going just about 4 feet over the door and about a foot past the door there. There's a Tassie dog looking at it. She's like, what are you doing? And this is 2 by 6 lumber, and the things that I needed to take into consideration is my door going to be able to open, which I wanted to check here. The door needs to be able to open over the floor, so I measured that I would have enough room once I put my floorboard on that it will clear my floor. That was important. And then how far it will open this direction so that I would have enough room on this end. And my tub is 31 inches wide with a 4-inch wall on that side. That gives me enough room that my door can completely open and into the mudroom and without hitting the tub. So that was important. And then it's about a foot on the inside of this wall, so they're not going to be able to even see it from the outside. And it goes about a foot past the door there. It will go up 8 feet and above the door there. Now, when you're constructing your floor framing, like I said, first you need to level your deck blocks. What I did is I took dirt from the high spots and moved it down to the low spots, and then I tamped down that dirt with those blocks. Just put a lot of weight on them, and I will tamp them down again after I get the floorboard on. So you want to level everything, and you want to level and square your floorboards. And I'm just using this cheap bubble level. And what it is, it's got a bubble on this end. And water and air, levels when you put it in on a level surface, the bubble will show where it's level. So I'm using a level to see where this is level at, and I've got it set there, and I can see that the bubble, you won't be able to see it probably, but I can see that the bubble is level. So that's leveled across that direction, and then you also want to level them this direction, and you can see that's not level that direction. And it's showing, if you lift it up, you can tell which end is low. It's got to come up. By raising the bubble up that far, I can see that it needs to come up on that end. Now, I could put more dirt underneath that block. That's a pain in the ass to try and scoop an exact amount in, then measure an exact amount in. Plus, it would settle anyway. So instead, what I will do is I will cut a small piece of vinyl, which I've done many times, and I will just lift this board up just a little bit, these two boards, and I will shim underneath these boards with a piece of vinyl that goes underneath this board here, and until I get it to exactly the right height. I'm thinking probably about a 1/16 of an inch will be enough to shim that up, and then this will be level, and it needs to be level this direction towards the house, and it needs to be level the long direction. Now, the long direction is pretty good, but going towards the house, it's a little bit down lower on this end towards the house than it is on the front. So I will have to shim underneath these two boards on this end. Okay, and so my next step will be to put in the rest of the floor joists and then level up everything, make sure that it's all square. Now I want to talk about squaring, and here's my square. And you can get these anywhere. I got this at the dollar store for a whole $1, okay? They're not expensive. Got a square, and it's got the measurements for inches and everything on it. But you want to square your corners. And what you do is you put this against one side and against the other side. And you can see that it should be square that direction, and it should be square that direction. You want to square all your corners. Now, I do this before I put my 4x8 sheet on, but then once I put the 4x8 sheet on, because it's square, I can move the border in just a little bit to make sure that it squares up. I did this on all 4 corners just to square up my corners and make sure that they're level and flat. You don't want them sticking out past your edge of your boards, or you're going to have a ski-wampus floor. And you don't want a ski-wampus floor. It makes it much more difficult to build your walls on, okay? So that's the next step. And I've got this measured out. You probably won't be able to see my measurements, but I've already put in my measurements on 16-inch centers. And I'm going to go cut the rest of my floor joists like those. And on 16-inch centers, then I'll put in the rest of my floor joists. Now, okay folks, so now I've got the floor all framed. And I had to pull it out, put those floor joists in, and then pull and screw them on both ends. And then slide it back in place over my blocks. And you can see I've added in two more of those deck blocks there. One on that end where the tub's going to be. I want it right in there centered so that it gives more support to it. Then I've got one in the center to give the entire structure a little bit more support. Generally, you don't want these deck blocks any more than about 7 feet. Because this is a small structure, I went 8 feet, but 7 feet is the recommended distance between any of these cement blocks. So that's the floor structure. And I've leveled it, I've squared all the corners, and then I will now put on the floor sheathing, and then I will level it again, and I'll get on top of it, and I'll jump up and down and pound to make sure that it's all flattened in and level and square, and nothing jumps up and down or bounces around on it. And so that's the next step. We'll just go ahead and get on the floor panel. Okay folks, so there is the floor framing with the floor sheathing on it. 3/4 inch OSB. And I got on top of it and I stomped all around and leveled it all off, and it's really solid. I mean, it doesn't move at all. It's not shaky, doesn't move around at all. And I checked that my door will open up with plenty of room underneath the door frame down there, so that if I put a floor, which I will put some type of floor covering, probably hardwood floor down here, it will clear it without scuffing it up. And that gives me a nice platform now to build my walls. So this is the view from my back porch, and right there, like I said, I've got a little group of deer, and this little group of deer has been here all winter long. They're yearlings, but occasionally I'll get a doe mixed in with them, and once in a while I'll get a buck. There was a 4-point buck hanging down on here. So this is what I'll see when I'm taking a bath in my Japanese hot tub, is I get to see these wild deer come down here in the backyard. So it was kind of interesting. They just showed up tonight, so I thought, well, I'll just get a video of them and show you what this view is going to look like. Morning everybody. Well, it's time to get back onto this mudroom and hot tub project, and first thing I did this morning is I got out here and I made my first wall. Now this is the wall that will be going on next to the house over the door, and one of the things I want to tell you is it's much easier to construct these walls, especially these small walls, right on the ground than it is to try to build them in place. If you try to build them in place, you're going to have all kinds of headaches and have to be climbing on a ladder and everything like that. This is safer, easier to do, and then you just pick it up and put it in place and then screw it down to the floorboards. So what I've got here is this is the wall that will go over the door. So I've got a door opening there that is quite a bit wider. It's about 1 inch on each side wider than the door itself. That way the door can open up completely, but it will also leave me room so that I can put a fascia board next to the door, because there's going to be a gap there, remember I told you? So I can put a fascia board along the 2x4 inside of the doorway to cover up that space. And that will also still allow me, if I need to, I can get access to that wiring right there next to the cabin if I decide I need to do something with that wiring. So that's why I'm doing that. And it's also got room in here for R13 insulation bats. So there'll be an R13 insulation bat in those spaces there. Now these are 2x4x8s, are top plate and bottom plate. Okay, and I'm using just a single top plate. Now I'll explain why. I'm using 2x4x8, which is the exact length of the board, so I don't have to cut those at all. And then I'm using 2x4 studs. A stud is approximately 92 3/4 inches long, and it is designed, they make these different lengths, but these ones are designed for a double header plate, so you'd have another 2x4 on top of that, and a single floor plate, okay? And the reason they do that is because if you're building up high or you got a lot of weight or something like that up above, you need to have a double top plate according to codes. Now with a structure this size, with a roof, square feet roof of this size, I don't need a double plate. And by not using a double plate, what I'll be able to do is I'll be able to overlap, because my boards are 4x8 sheets, my wall panels, and so I'll be able to overlap them down over approximately 1.5 inches over the edge of the board, and I will screw that directly to the floor framing, and that will overlap the floorboard and the floor framing to provide more protection from rain and stuff and wind seepage coming in under the floor. Okay, so that's a good design for small houses, tiny houses, sheds, things like this. Using a single top plate instead of a double top plate and studs gives you some room there when you put your wall panels on, you'll have something to screw it down to. So now I'm just going to tip this up, and I'm going to carry it in, and I'm going to put it in place on my floor panel. So that's the next step. Okay, so folks, so I brought that wall in, and it helps if you have two people, but I just did it by myself. And I've set it up in place. I just leaned it up against the wall until I got it in place, kind of squished it over and got it in place, and then screwed it down through the ridge boards on the floor frame and through the floor sheathing. And you can see now that the opening goes over the door and leaves enough room there so the door will open up completely, and it leaves just enough room that I can put a fascia board on the inside of those 2x4s to finish up that door frame to cover up any gap, because there's going to be a bit of a gap there next to the door. And what I did is I left the 2x4 floor plate intact while I put this in place, but I didn't put any screws into it right there in front of the door, because what I need to do, the door won't open with that 2x4 there. So what I need to do is I need to cut that 2x4 out, but it's a lot easier to do that after it's in place rather than try to work with a small piece there and a small piece there and try and get them in place. It makes it pretty wobbly, so I just use the entire floor, and then I'll cut out that 2x4 around the door there, and that will let my door open up. And then you can see that it goes up about a little bit more than a foot below the window. And that will allow me to put I'm going to put a shed roof on this that will go up to almost right below that window and then come down to the front, sloping towards the front. So that will give me about a foot drop over 4 feet, which is more than enough to keep the snow and rain running off the end of this roof here. And it goes up above the door. These are 8-foot walls. The door's 6'8", so it goes up above the door about a foot 3 inches, something like that. And this will have it won't have a ceiling in it. It will just have an open up to the roof, which will also be insulated, so it will have good headroom, lots of good headroom in this little room here. And okay, that's how you do a wall. You just tip it up into place, and then I'm using, just so you know, for almost all this construction except for the panels, I'm using these 3-inch deck screws instead of nails. Screws tend to hold a little bit better than nails, easier to work with, especially nails tend to bend and you get frustrated and have to pull nails back out. And so I've just found that even for the extra expense, the deck screws for a project like this are just so much easier to work with. And so I'm using these 3-inch deck screws, and I've got 2 screws through each of the ends of the 2x4s attached to the top and bottom plates, and then I use those same 3-inch screws to go through the bottom plate, through the floor sheathing, and down into the frame and down into this ridge board here. So they will go all the way down in to the ridge board, down like that. Now I'm also going to put my sheathing over the outside, which will go down approximately 1.5 inches below that, and I will screw through the sheathing, the wall sheathing, into that. So that gives that wall a lot of structure when you get done with it. For a small structure like this, the way I'm doing it gives it a lot more structural support, and that's why I'm doing it. So now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to cut that door opening, and I'm just going to rough cut it for now. I've got a finish saw I'll finish it up with, but I'm going to rough cut it so that door will open, and then I'm going to build this front wall right here, and we'll put this front wall in place. Okay folks, so there is the front framed wall, and again I just constructed on the ground, makes it a lot easier to construct. And the only thing I haven't done is I haven't put in the cross pieces, which will frame in the window frame. I've got them marked to be put in, but I'm not going to put those in until I stand it up, because it's just that much less weight for me to carry and drag over there. Okay, so now I'm going to go put that on the floor frame and attach that to a floor frame. And I'll be using a what's called a cripple that brace that's just attached to the side of the floor that will help hold that wall in place until I get my screws down through the floor frame. So let's do that. Okay, so there is the front wall put in place, and I've just got it screwed into the floor rim, and then I've got a couple of scrap braces, and I'll probably add a couple more here because the wind's trying to kick up, and I don't like working with heavy objects hanging over me with the wind kicking up like this. So I probably won't work on this today and finish it up in the morning. Not too much more to do. And so what I did is I just took a couple of the scrap pieces that I'd cut off, and I screwed those, and I had them all ready to go when I put this wall up, because I only had one person, just me, doing it. Normally you would have two people working on a wall like this, one holding it while the other one puts some screws in it. But I've learned how to do tricks over time. When I built this cabin, I built this entire cabin completely 100% by myself without any other people. And so I learned some tricks. And using these scrap braces like this, all you do is you put the screw in the bottom, and then you have your screw ready to go on the top, so that when you tip your wall in place, all you got to do is grab your drill and screw it in place, and then you can kind of walk, what we call walking the wall. You can walk the wall back an inch or so until you get it right exactly where you want it, and then screw it down to the rim plate. So I haven't put in my window framing top and bottom plate yet, which I will do tomorrow, and they're going to go out at 28 inches bottom, so that it's about 4 inches above the tub. That way I'll have a good view when I'm laying in the tub. I'll be able to look out through the window. Normally your windows would go at the same height as the top of your door, which is about 6 foot 8 inches. Normally the top of the window goes up to the top of the door. That way everything kind of lines up, but I'm doing it differently because I want the view from laying in the tub. So the windows will be a bit lower than that, probably about a foot lower than where they would normally go. But I've got one window here. I'm not sure if you can see this. There will be one window in that opening there in front of the door window, so this will still allow natural light to come in from this side, and I'll be able to look through that window in the door out also and see that view. And then another window right next to it, and both of them are about 3 foot by 3 foot windows. So they're going to be good sized windows. So basically you got a really nice landscape window in there in this unit. Okay, so that's about all I'm going to do for today. I'll start on it again in the morning, let this wind die down and let my batteries charge up on some of my tools. So coming right along. Okay folks, so these are the sidewalls, and just like the front and back wall, I constructed them on the ground. Makes them a lot easier to construct, and then I just tip them up in place. Now this one here is the right side wall, which will go where the tub is, and I just divided it, split it in two with another 2x4, and those will be filled with insulation. And then this is the wall where the door will go. So I just measured out the door and left enough room. When you do your doors, you got to leave enough room that they will open without hitting the frame, and also enough room to put in your catch plates for your locks and stuff like that, and your hinges. So I've just left a opening there large enough for my door to go in, and still leave enough room to open everything like that. So now I'm just going to go tip these into place and screw them down, and we'll have the walls all finished. Okay folks, I've got those end walls in now. This will be where the door is, and I got my door ready to go in. I'll have to put a top plate above the door, but I like to fit the door in, give myself enough room to put my weather stripping and that in before I put that top board in. It makes it a little bit easier. That way I can eyeball it before I put it in. And then the back wall, real simple, that's the space where the tub will go right there. And it's just divided with another 2x4 in the middle there, and that'll all be filled in with insulation. And then I got one window in place. Now that's not in place permanently. I've just put it in there to measure, make sure my opening was the right width, and put in my top and bottom plate. And so that window goes right in front of, you can see it goes right in front of the door window. So once I get that window all cleaned up so I can see through it, because it's been sitting outside for 3 or 4 years, get it all cleaned up and everything like that, I'll have a nice view out my back window right out to the mountains back there. So now I'm going to, it's about lunchtime here, and I'm kind of tired, so I'm going to take Taz and we're going to go down and get some lunch, and then I'll come back and work on this again this evening. I should be able to get all the wall panels on now. I'm ready for my wall panels. Okay folks, I've got the front panels on now with the windows, and they're just temporarily in there with a couple of screws for now, but you can see how nice they came out. Those are about 3 foot by 3 foot windows, or 30 inch, about a 30 inch by 3 foot I think is what they are. They're not 3 foot wide, they're about 30 inches wide by 3 foot. Nice windows, and I got those for free. I think I told you, from doing some pest control. I bartered a lady for doing some pest control and got 6 of those windows. Didn't cost me a thing. And I even cleaned them up a little bit so I could see through them. Now, I was going to tell you, this is 7/16 OSB that I'm using. It is the same product used on big, fancy, expensive houses. You just never see it because they usually cover it over with vinyl siding. Okay, and I'm not going to use vinyl siding. Too damn expensive. Now, I was going to get T111, which is what I use on the cabin. That's this siding here. And I got this back, 10 years ago, and I've never stained it or painted it because it's just such a great product that it just weathers to a nice this nice reddish brown color. It's just beautiful, and there's just no reason, and you can see there's no weather damage or anything to it at all. It's just a really nice product. However, I paid about $30 a sheet for that back when I built the cabin. Now they want almost $50 a sheet for that same product. And I was going to use it, at least on this front face, but I just decided I'm just not going to put that much money into this mudroom, and nobody's going to see it but me. So instead, I'm just going to use this 7/16 OSB, and I've used this before many times. And you can paint this, and I'll use oil paint because that covers better, and I will just paint this. And that's why I've left the windows so I can take them back out, because I'll paint around underneath the windows before I put them in permanently. And it'll take a nice paint. And if I do it in a kind of a darkish brownish color, you probably won't notice the difference. And then I will put trim boards around the edges and corners. So there'll be a trim board all the way around there. And I've got to get that all done. Now I was just going to show you, I put my tub in just to make sure I was going to have room. So there's my tub in the end of it. You can see I've got a nice view, 2 big windows over it. And that will be all finished up later. I'm going to do all the interior finishing at a later time, because I'm going to go get a lot of salvage and recycled materials that I know where I can get a bunch of really nice materials in very small quantities to finish up the inside of this. But I'll still be able to use it even for now. But when I'm ready to, then I will insulate it and then put in my finished materials, my hardwood flooring and my rock surround and that sort of stuff. But for now, it's still going to be functional and useful. Now I still got to get that back panel on there, and then I've got the door panel to put on. Okay folks, there I've got the end wall or the sidewall panel on, and that's just a straight 4x8 sheet. I didn't have to cut it at all since this is a 4x8 room, and it just went up slick. And then I've already showed you this front wall with the windows in it, and then I also did the other end of the wall and put my door in. And the door is it's actually an interior door, so it's not quite as tall as a exterior door, and it's about 30 inches wide, 29 inches wide. So my opening, or 29.5 inches wide, my opening was about 30 inches, but it's going to work good for this. And I was just going to show you how we cut these openings for these doors and these windows. Okay, because they're cut, instead of trying to measure them, what we do is we just put the whole panel up and then we rough cut a hole. And the tool you want to use for that is this little number here. This is a jigsaw, and what you can do, if you angle it, let me hold this with my other hand here. What you can do is, you can see it's got an angled front there. If you put that against a wall like that with that angled front, and then you just let it slowly, with the full power, let it go right down into the board, it will just drill itself right into the board. So you can start right in the middle of a board and just cut around. And that's how I made these holes here. So just let that go down, let it go right in, and it'll drop right into there, and then you can just go on and cut off the rest of your holes. And that's a jigsaw. Very handy little saw that you should have if you're doing construction work. And what I do is I rough cut the hole, and then I go back around it with the jigsaw a second time, and I go right next to the 2x4 framing so that it will be nice and smooth as possible. It's still going to be a rough cut, but I'm going to put trim board around it so you won't notice any small rough spots. And so it opens up. Now I did leave the 2x4 here in front, and I think I'm just going to leave it that way. It doesn't matter since this is an outside door, and it will kind of protect this edge right here. This edge where I'm going to be stepping, that's going to get a lot more wear than the rest of the building. And so by having that extra 2x4 there, just gives a little bit more strength on that floor. I won't wear out the floor so much going in and out. And so you just have to remember to kind of step over that little threshold. Most old houses had thresholds in them. And then I just screwed the hinges in. I got the hinge plates screwed in on both ends. And you need to allow yourself room when you're putting in doors. Just remember, you got to leave yourself enough room to allow your door to swing open. Otherwise, if you have it in an exact tight fit, you'll never get your door open. So you leave generally a 1/4 inch around. Really good carpenters can do it with an 1/8 of an inch, but I leave a 1/4 inch around bigger than the hole, so it ended up being a 1/2 inch wider, a 30-inch hole instead of a 29-inch hole opening for the door, and a 1/2 inch taller, wider at the top, and that gives me enough room. I will put a weather strip board 1x2 right along the bottom and the top up there, so that it butts up against it. Right now there's nothing for the door to butt up against. Okay, so that's it for this session, and tomorrow I will get the roof on, and I got to kind of figure out how I'm going to go over that eave over there, because it's got to go right up against it over there, so I got to do a little bit of measuring. Tubs in, floors in, walls in, doors in, windows look really good. Got a real nice view out the back. 2 windows, one of them right over the tub, and I showed you the deer coming up in here. So this is going to be a nice little room. Now this would make an excellent little room for a lot of different uses. Could be used as a utility room, workshop, a little office. You could have a desk in here. You could even put your wood stove in here and then have a vent and vent it into your house. So, you know, a lot of different ways you could use this room in here. So I'm going to use it for a hot tub and to take off my muddy clothes and stuff like that. And I may put a little small workbench out here if I want to store some tools out here. Okay. Well, hey folks, it looks like this is going to be the end of this project for this week. It's decided to turn off rainy and windy again, and it's supposed to have rain all over this weekend. So what I've done is I've dried in the mud room and utility room. I just put up my 4x8 sheet of material that I was going to use for the roof, and I just put that up on top of it and screwed it down so the rain won't come in and get on the inside of the utility room. So what I'm going to do now is I'll call this an end for this video, because it's got most of the instructions to show you how this is being constructed. And then this week I'll go and collect the rest of my materials that I need to finish up the roof and the interior of this utility room, mud room, Japanese hot tub room, whatever you're going to use it for. I'm going to use it for a tub. And then I'll be able to show you make one more video of this project, and I'll show you the interior work that I do and what kind of materials I'm going to use there. And I'm going to scrounge up some fancy materials I'm hoping to find. And since there's just a small amount of space in that little 4x8 room, I shouldn't need a whole lot of materials. I should be able to find some nice stuff. So that's it for this video, and maybe next week, hopefully by the end of next week, I'll have this project completely done and be able to show it all functioning and working and be able to take me a bath. Thanks for coming by, everybody. Make sure you go by my website, simplesolarhomesteading.com. Come sit on my porch, check out the ebooks and books that I have available there. Tons of free stuff too. There's lots of ideas for small houses, cabins, off-grid housing, a lot of features of cabins that have been built for my plans by customers, and even ideas for tiny houses on wheels in the competition that I had a couple of years ago. So come on by my website and check all that stuff out. We'll see you next week.